So would you please join me in welcoming to Peoria and the PACE Conference, Dr. Michael Crow.
Thank you, Mayor. I've never actually spoken to a group of people sitting at breakfast tables, so it's a little bit unusual, but nice to see everyone. I thought what I would try to do today is spend some time getting our collective mental juices flowing, and then hopefully have some time for some discourse. And I'm going to take a slightly different angle on this concept of convergence, education, the community, and business and civic engagement, because I think that there is a precursor to building a successful community and helping a successful community to advance that is an 800-pound elephant sitting in the room in front of all of us, which is, how are we doing economically? And so I want to spend some time talking about that and talking about how a community can come together, how it can converge, how through convergence we can actually help to facilitate economic success and economic growth, and from that economic success and economic growth, how we can then help our community to be more successful. So I'm going to walk through that. And I'm going to spend some time laying out some of the reasons why this is difficult. Now, the key to convergence and the reason that convergence, using that as the theme of this conference, is so difficult to pull off is that it is absolutely essential that convergence be built around a common objective. A clearly defined, very simple to understand common objective. Now, common objective means that most people agree, not all. You can never get everyone to agree to anything, even in your own household, or at least mine. We have disagreements sometimes around a table of just a handful of people. So it's not, convergence doesn't mean total agreement. Convergence doesn't mean everyone is behind this. Convergence means you've got a common objective that most institutions, most people, and most groups are behind. Now, I think that there is merit and value in thinking about, in a not a literal sense, that is economic development as the common objective, but let's use this as an example that what we want is economic competitiveness for Greater Phoenix, for Arizona, for the United States. We want economic competitiveness as the common objective. And I'll come back and talk a little bit about that. I would argue that economic competitiveness, if it was our common objective, if everything that we did was measured from that, we could, from that, create the environment in which social, economic, and cultural change could be driven at a faster rate and at a more positive rate. And from that, we would have a higher probability of continuing to build on the foundation of an already existing successful community, a more successful community. Now, this is something that escapes many people's thinking. This very simple notion that if economic competitiveness was our convergence objective, and if we were able to drive economic competitiveness at a harder and faster rate, that our ability to accomplish all the things that we want to accomplish, socially, culturally, community development perspective, or whatever, would be easier, because we have that as an objective. Now, it is the case in the history of the United States that if you look at the performance of the United States economically, and if you look at the development of the United States in terms of our social and cultural development, we seem to do better when we have a common objective. Now, sometimes that common objective is an enemy, like in World War II. Sometimes that common objective is the settlement of the West, or the movement of the United States across the entire continent. But if you look back and dissect, which many people have done, and I've looked at their work, those common objectives allowed us to not economically prosper, but to socially and culturally prosper as a result of our economic focus. And I'm going to argue with you right now that we do not have convergence right now. We've got people running around saying the sky is falling, and we've got people running around saying that we've got to put more money into social welfare systems because everything's collapsing. We've got people running around saying that health care is out of control from a cost perspective, which it is, consuming 17% of our economy right now. 17% of our economy. And let me just use health care as the example. If we had economic competitiveness as our convergence objective, perhaps we could find a way, and this is not to take away from anyone in the healthcare business, don't get me wrong, but when you're spending 17% of your economy, $7,000 per person per year, and you rank 24th in longevity among the 30 industrialized nations, many of which that have longer lifespans than we do, spend 1/3 of what we spend per person, something is not right. We are not economically competitive when it comes to healthcare. We have not converged on looking at competitiveness as our convergence objective. And I believe that for a number of reasons, and I actually wrote down 6 reasons, we have no convergence now. And I don't offer these reasons as negative input to you today. I offer these reasons to you as realistic assessments of where we are as a country, where we are as a state, and where we are as a metropolitan area. These are things that keep us from converging around this notion of economic competitiveness being a critical objective from which our community can be enhanced, from which our community can be developed. What's the first of these reasons why there's no convergence now? One, it's a kind of funny thing. I call it arrogant ignorance. And the arrogant ignorance within the United States is that we are resting on our laurels, believing that as a result of our great nation and as a result of all the things that we have done and all the things that we have achieved, good things will happen. Well, they will. But that's insufficient. We need to understand that the world has changed, and the notion of economic competitiveness that existed in 1950, 1960, 1970, 1980, even 1990 does not exist anymore. We have not, that's the ignorance part, we have not yet fully realized that to be competitive in the world as it is constructed today, economically, we are going to have to look ourselves in the mirror, pull ourselves together as a community, and literally rethink many, many things. We are not yet ready to do this. We have not yet been able to overcome what I call our arrogant ignorance. We literally don't believe there is competition. We don't understand the rise and the development, all of which is good in the long run, of the rest of the world as competitors. We don't get it yet. We don't understand it yet. We feel it, but we don't understand it. We're ignorant to it. And so one of the most important things that we have to overcome is our arrogance of our previous success and our ignorance of the rise of the competition. So let's imagine we could do that. If we literally, and I want you to keep this in the back of your mind, if we could imagine that we want to be the most economically competitive nation. We want that to be our status. Well, if we want that to be our status, then we have to understand what's involved with that. Second, and this is going to be a little bit controversial, and it might require some questions to sort of eke it out, but the second thing that we've done, and it strikes me as just unbelievably strange, We have defaulted to government as the controller. It's like all eyes are on Washington. Everybody spends time, until they get sick of it, listening to the political discourse. Okay. Why? Solutions to problems come from communities. Communities and states are the laboratories of democracy. We are the people in the communities, the cities, the local school districts, the local businesses, the local universities, the local community colleges. We are the means by which solutions will be derived, new pathways will be engineered, new concepts, new ways for community engagement. We have become stifled by thinking that someone else is responsible for everything. No one else is responsible for everything. We have to think how we're going to work our way through these problems and through these issues. Arizona, by the way, I think is a fantastic place which remains open-minded. But nonetheless, the debate continues around this notion that somehow the government's going to determine this, or the government's going to determine that, or that there's some force that's out there that we can't control called the government. Well, one, we can control it. Two, it's not the pathway to success. It doesn't mean that local government and local community leaders aren't a part of the innovation process. It means that in a country of 310 million people, the size of the United States, it is unrealistic to expect that it can be managed from a group of individuals in Washington, D.C. that have some capacity to help us to think about all aspects of our life. It's never going to happen. It's not going to happen. So we have defaulted and are waiting too much and assuming that somehow the government will be the controller. We have a third and very serious problem related to convergence. Very serious. It's not bad, it's just something that has to be looked at because of the way that it happens. So since the year 2000 in the United States, all of the additional income in the entire American economy has been spread out across the population as the economy has grown. And 1% of the population has captured 60% of that economic growth in their personal income. 1%. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't hold anything against those individuals that have been able to make investments and be successful or do this and do that. But that model of that level of concentration of personal income in such a small percentage of the population, it doesn't work. Now, let me tell you what we're not focused on in our discussion and why communities have got to come together and rethink this. What has happened is 2011, you may not know, was the most productive year in the history of the American economy. Fewer workers produced more products and goods and services on a per worker basis or a per hour basis than in the history of the American economy. What does that mean? It means that computers, technology, and other innovations are replacing entire classes of management, entire classes of positions, entire functionalities, and those people that are advancing those technologies get wealthier and wealthier, and those people that can use those technologies have higher and higher salaries, and those that aren't a part of that in general, and I'm giving you a generalization here, have flat incomes to declining incomes. So this notion of uneven opportunity is a huge factor into why we're not able to converge and why we're not focused on the right things, in my view. The fourth reason for non-convergence is that our education system and our education enterprise in general, from the universities to K through 12 with some exceptions, are insufficiently innovative and insufficiently focused on and pressed on this ultimate objective of economic competitiveness. Take a look at my own institution that I'm a part of. We've been innovating like crazy. We're nowhere near where we need to be. Nowhere near the levels of productivity and impact and lowering our cost and finding ways to use technology, finding ways to advance new models for education at the university level. We've implemented many, many, many innovations, and we've seen dramatic improvements in the university, but we're nowhere near where we need to be because we are stifled in innovating and being innovative by people holding on to some model of the past. And I'll talk a little bit about that. We have very narrow views relative to education. The fifth reason for non-convergence, in my view, is we don't really fully grasp the nature of the economic competitive unit. It used to be that villages or regions used to compete against each other in Europe, where many of our ancestors came from. It used to be in the United States that we competed town to town, company to company. And while all of that still goes on, it turns out that the main competitive structures operating on the globe today are about 200 places that are aggregated large metropolitan region cities like Shanghai, like Singapore, like Greater Los Angeles, like Central Texas. And it turns out that in the United States, 10 of these places have been identified. They are called megapolitans. These 10 megapolitan areas in the United States, of which you're sitting in the heart of one. The one that you're in is called the Sun Corridor. Phoenix is in the heart of that Sun Corridor. The megapolitans in the United States in the next 30 years will be responsible for housing about 70% of the population growth and about 80% of the economic growth in the United States. And it turns out that the Sun Corridor, where we live, which is Yavapai County, Maricopa County, Pinal County, and Pima County, just those four counties, just looking just at those four counties, is one of these regions, is one of these aggregations of communities that have the capacity to be economically powerful because of size, because of resources, because of focus, because of infrastructure, and all the things that we presently are benefiting from. Now, those four counties in Arizona, and we're not thinking this way yet, have an economy the same size as the country of Finland, the country of Malaysia, or the country of the United Arab Emirates, which is a Gulf nation, infinitely wealthy because of gold, which has two cities in it, one called Dubai and one called Abu Dhabi, both of which are highly rapidly evolving economies. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is that still in Arizona, we still are thinking that the competition, many people think this way, is between Phoenix and Tucson. Now, on Saturday it will be, but that's for football, and football, turns out, in all actuality, is a game. What I'm talking about isn't a game. What I'm talking about is what will separate us from having the communities that we want to have with the social, cultural, community engagement levels and community success levels that we wish to have, and not having those things. Because if you do not have economic success, and if you do not have economic progress, the path to community success, the path to social mobility, the path to being able to move the American model forward, where a kid of a working class family like myself has an opportunity to advance within the society because of educational opportunities and because of open doors and open access and the way that things are working in terms of opportunity and chance. That doesn't happen if there isn't a healthy, growing, thriving economy in which all those things can occur. If we have the wrong model of how we're competing, it's not Peoria competing against Tempe or Tempe competing against Tucson. It's got to be the Sun Corridor, which is south of Tucson all the way to Prescott, thinking together, building infrastructure together that makes us more competitive, focusing on educational success that makes us more competitive, and looking at who our competitors are and measuring our progress against them. So Shanghai. How many of you have been to Shanghai? Did you find it interesting? So Shanghai, at the end of World War II, had a per capita income of $300 a year. $300. Shanghai, the region around Shanghai, the province that it's in, now has per capita incomes greater than Italy or the United Kingdom. It's unbelievable. Unbelievable. That's a competitive unit. That region. It's about 25 million people in that region, about 16 million people in the city itself. That's a competitive unit where things are aggregated. Universities, schools, school performance, infrastructure investments, airports, community enhancement, arts, culture. It's unbelievable. That's the competitive unit, and we haven't figured that out yet. And the sixth and final factor why we're not converging now is that we're unable at the moment to have the long-term view. A group like this could derive a long-term view. The Arizona Town Hall tries every year and I think contributes to the notion of a long-term view. Well, that's a very difficult process. What is the long-term view? Because you have to make decisions for the long term. Most of the decisions that we make now are not long-term in their orientation. Most of the decisions that we make now are short-term, short-run, immediate. This debate that's going on in Washington right now by the super committee, which may result in nothing or may result in something, I don't know. They're making emergency decisions because we haven't had a long-term view. And those decisions may or may not be based on meaningful things. And at the end of the day, they won't determine our outcome. Because if they determine our outcome, why are we even here talking? We're here talking because we'd like better communities. We're here talking because we'd like our community engagement levels to be enhanced. We're here talking because we would like all the communities that we're from to be more successful for our children. It is in our nature to want what we leave behind to be better. And so we, at the moment, are lacking convergence because of our arrogant ignorance, which we have to stare into the face, because of our total default to the government as if someone else is responsible, because of the fact that we haven't figured out yet how to make certain that everyone has access to economic opportunity. And I don't mean through government programs, and I don't mean through reassignment of income, and I don't mean through higher taxation. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about through educational opportunity, through providing to everyone a chance to be successful in actually what a 21st century economy looks like. Not some delusional historical model about what it was like when we were growing up in 1955, 1965, whatever it was, not relevant. Not relevant. Education, not innovative enough. A lack of awareness of our competitive unit. It's not the city, it's not the town, it's not the village, it's not the farm, it's these aggregates, and that we don't have a long enough term view. Now, in moving forward, we have to focus on, and only on, this catalytic objective, economic competitiveness. Things that don't focus us on that then are not helping us to lay the foundation for how it is that our communities are actually going to be more successful. If all of our community engagement is about how we're going to deal with all of the people who no longer have jobs, until more don't have jobs, until there's further weakening of the economy, that's not going to get us to where we need to be. Now, I was at the Kauffman Foundation not too long ago in Kansas City, which is the nation's leading foundation in entrepreneurship and innovation. And ASU is one of their largest grant recipients, and we're the selected most innovative university from an entrepreneurship education perspective, according to the Kauffman Foundation. But we're over there, and we're talking, and they're running these numbers up on the board as they're talking. If these guys at the Kauffman Foundation, most of whom are very thoughtful thinkers about how to make the country successful, they said if we could just get one number in our mind, the number 4%, 4% economic growth on average over a 20-year window, and then they run the model for the United States at that point. Well, how much money do we have to defend the country at that point? A lot. How much money do we have at that point to build infrastructure? A lot. How much money do we have at that point to invest in the arts, to invest in community development, to invest in new models for health care? That number, the number 4%, 4% sustained economic growth. And they were looking at a group of us, including me, and saying, why can't you guys pull it off? I'm talking about across the entire country. 4% sustained economic growth. We run at well below that now, and averaged over long periods of time well below that. And so they were arguing that you get to 4% economic growth not through the creation of jobs in multinational corporations that move those jobs to the lowest labor cost at will, but you get there by having communities and groups of communities and places wherein the entrepreneurial spirit of every person can be captured, and where new businesses can be started instantly, and where new enterprises can be initiated rapidly. We're not in that kind of setting right now because we have many things that stand in front of us. And so this notion of economic competitiveness as a catalytic objective to which all things. So if a person is, and there are some states that require this and some don't, if a person is on unemployment because they've lost their job and they're receiving support from the rest of us because of their unemployment, how are they being prepared for the actual jobs that need to be filled going forward? What I'm saying here is we have to look at literally every single thing we're doing, how the K through 12 schools are organized and operated, how they compete and compare against not the school down the street, not the school up in Flagstaff. How do they compare on an international basis? How prepared are our students and thus our workers to compete on an international basis? I'm not going to bore you with all of the statistics, but we're not where we should be. We're not where we should be. Most of you have heard, I'll just see, how many of you know that, so I'm the 14th generation of my father's family in the United States. My son is the 15th. My granddaughter, recently born, is the 16th. 16 generations. And it is strange for me to hear the statistics that my son's generation and my granddaughter's generation, net, all in, calculated, will not see the improvements that I was able to see. I'm not talking about them as individuals. I'm talking about on a generational basis. And how many of you have heard this talked about, that somehow the country has peaked and that the next generation will be less educated, the next generation will be less economically successful. How many of you have heard that general logic out there? Yeah. How many of you haven't heard that? So a few people, but most of you have heard it. Well, I hear that kind of thing, and it makes me apoplectic. Like, what are you people talking about? We're not going to let that happen. We have to converge all assets, all energy, all talent around making the country economically competitive so that as a result of our economic competitiveness, we can build from that the society that we want, the communities that we want, and do all the other things that we would like to achieve. So, how do we do this? We do this with groups like this that are focused on civic engagement, understanding that civic engagement has the purpose of engaging the people across many walks of life around the notion of making the community better. That's what civic engagement is about. To make the community better, we're going to have to address this economic competitiveness issue. And if we do address that economic competitiveness issue, we're going to have an opportunity as a result of that to accelerate our evolution to higher levels of social mobility, to higher levels of social success, to higher levels of community engagement and community success, to improved health care, improved health outcomes, all at a lower cost. And all these things are possible if we can only get our minds around this notion that it's about our competitiveness. And remember that first item, and I'm going to push on this just a little bit. That first reason that we have difficulty conceptualizing this. Arrogant ignorance. So I hang out with about 150 other university presidents that are presidents of the research universities. So of the 9,000 or so higher education institutions in the United States, 150 are comprehensive enterprises that are involved in knowledge creation and technology creation and hundreds of subjects, and they're called the research universities. They're some of the greatest institutions ever created in the history of the human race. And the level of arrogance among these individuals and these institutions is beyond belief. Here's how they work. The way for us to be great in the United States is to make sure that my university excludes as many students as we can possibly exclude so that we can keep our faculty focused on, now I'm picking on us now to give you a sense, so we can keep our faculty doing the things that they do the same way that they've always done it. And it's ever so troublesome to us. We don't really understand how everyone else is going to be educated in this country of 310 million people. But we have no room to take any more. In fact, we want to take less. And we need more money for each of them. And I just throw my hands up and I say, you people are insane. You're totally, utterly insane. If we do not figure out how to innovate and to overcome our arrogant view of ourselves. When I was in high school, there used to be this thing that would go on saying, you're going to let that guy eat your lunch. If a guy came by at the high school dining table and ate your lunch off your plate, and you did nothing about it. That's what's going on right now. Our lunch is being eaten right off our plate, right off the American plate, and everybody's sitting around saying, well, what do we do? What do we do? And just picking on my own sector, the university sector, where we're sitting around saying, at UC Berkeley, for instance, right now, they decided they're not going to admit any more students from California. They only admit the upper 4%. Next year, they're going to admit something less than the upper 4%. Because according to the president of the University of California system, the physics of the funding of the university is, well, if you don't give us more money, that is the state, we can't have more students. Well, if we don't educate more students out of places like the University of California at Berkeley and other institutions like that, then we're doomed. ASU, different pathway. We've added 25,000 students since 2003. We've tripled our research since 2003. We've altered our model, introduced technology. We didn't expand the faculty to do those things. That amount of additional work out of the same faculty. Why are we doing that? Because we refuse to be arrogant or ignorant. We believe that it's not through resting on our laurels that we will be successful, but it is through our ability to adapt to the current situation that the country faces. And the current situation that the country faces is that we are not as economically competitive as our dreams and our aspirations and our hopes would like us to be and require us to be. So, my food for thought for you all as folks focused on community engagement: we need a single goal: to be the most economically competitive nation operating in the present configuration called planet Earth, period. And all that we can do to do that is necessary, and when we do that, we will have the resources to do everything else that we would like to achieve. So I'm going to stop there and see if there's questions. Thank you very much. I think there's microphones, or just shout it out. Yes? Yeah, so the comment is that she's hearing that the Chinese environments are such that a lot of manufacturers are coming back because rule of law is maintained in the United States. The what? Yeah, and they get tired of working in a single-party, no-election system. and so the answer is yes, that is occurring. Not at a huge level, but that low-hanging fruit would be to make certain that then we create an environment for when those companies moving back to the United States, or those plants moving back to the United States, what they find when they get here, because the wage profile is so much higher, therefore their competitive position is more challenging in terms of the selling of their product in a global market. Every amenity, every asset, everything that our communities can put in place for these companies to be successful, to be able to move quickly, to be able to make decisions quickly, to not be heavily burdened by taxes that they don't understand what they're for, to have the educational assets that they need and the educational access that they need. And we have a lot of that, but we don't have it concentrated enough. We could, oh, absolutely. Oh, by the way, I'm an eternal optimist. We are ready and rearing to go. We just have to get our own arrogance out of our way. Yes?
President Crow, I'm Dr. Krieger. I'm with AARP here.
I'm a member.
Thank you. We appreciate that. I hope we have a lot of members in the room. I couldn't agree with you more. I couldn't be more compatible with you. And I think it's incumbent on us not to just listen to you today, not to just take notes from you today, but it's incumbent upon us to reach out into the community and spread the message that you gave us today. But as a former faculty member myself, I know that you used some excellent resources preparing your remarks today. And I'm wondering if you would share those with us.
Oh, well, to share the excellent resources or the remarks? The excellent resources, well, let me say, we have a number of things that we've been doing at the university to sort of make the case that I'm making today, and we can certainly share with you, for instance, a talk that I gave in Tucson a few weeks ago. Had about 650 people there, where I focused on the Sun Corridor and our opportunities in the Sun Corridor. So yes, we can share that. If someone just sends me an email and tells me how to send it out, we'll get it out to everybody. And we have some other studies. We did a study called Arizona at 10 million. What would it take for Arizona to successfully transit to 10 million people, which is our population trajectory? What were the kinds of decisions that we'd have to make, the kinds of investments that would have to be made, the kind of things that would have to happen for that 10 million people to have an economic punch and an economic competitiveness position that's significant, as opposed to, because we could end up with 10 million people. We already have the second highest number of children living in poverty, second or third in the United States, spiked up very dramatically. It can't be 10 million people with those kinds of percentages of people in poverty. We've got to find a way to take care of that. And so we have, if you'd like those, I can get you a whole setup of that stuff. So, okay?
President Crow, go ahead.
Yeah. There's some kind of alarm going off there.
Okay, you always hear the human problem of workers.
Yes.
Employees, that they're overworked and underpaid.
Yes.
And especially now, since they're given more work
Yes.
and less pay. How do you get over the problem of the professors?
Yeah.
Meaning that they're getting more students and not getting more money.
Yeah, so the question is, how did we work it out at ASU? Yeah, so not easily, I'll say. So the question is, how were we able to convince our faculty to take more students and basically work for the same wage? And so we have not had any salary adjustments at ASU for 4 years. And so the answer is, first, we set a differentiated objective. We took the university, which was already a public service-oriented institution, and we said, we're going to strengthen our public service orientation. We're going to make the university more student-centric than faculty-centric. Most big research universities are faculty-centric. They're run by the faculty. They're organized to support the faculty. They're organized around the faculty and what the faculty needs. We're organized around what the student needs. And we say to faculty members, if you're not interested in our environment, then you really ought to find another place to work, because we're going to be heavily focused on student success, heavily focused on a broad cross-section of students. Now, what that means is that you change the mental set of the institution, and then you say, and we're going to do everything that we can to help you, the individual faculty member, to innovate. Technology and new ways of doing things and new ways to support things and new ways to, and so we've been doing that. And so what we've been getting is tremendous productivity increases from our faculty. Now we have to support our faculty with support staff so that we can extend the reach of our faculty. And some people, I noticed yesterday the Goldwater Institute was beating up on us because they haven't learned how to count at the Goldwater Institute. So they count in the following way. Every person that we hire that's not a faculty member, they call an administrator. So we take 1,500 veterans back from combat service in Iraq and Afghanistan, bring them to ASU, and then we hire 10 people to work with those veterans as counselors and advisors and so forth. And according to the Goldwater Institute, those are administrators and are responsible for our administrative bloat, when in fact they're people finding ways for us to be of greater service to our students. And so what we did, first off, was change the culture. The second thing, we built metrics around everything that we're doing so we can measure our success, and we're not where we'd like to be, but we've made huge progress. And the third thing that we focused on is helping our employees to have more impact. by organizing and reorganizing the institution. So.
President Crow, I'm with the ASU Lodestar Center on Philanthropy and Nonprofit Innovation, and we recently read a report from the Pew Foundation on research it had done about civic engagement. And that report revealed that the Gen Xers and the Millennium people underage, the boomers, do not understand the term civic engagement and are really turned off by that term. And I find that to be an interesting challenge, especially with the people with whom we work at the university. And I was just wondering how we would get them engaged in the term civic engagement.
Yeah, you're bringing up a very good point, and there's sort of three elements to it. So one element is all of us in this room, not everyone, but generally are baby boomers. There's a few people here that aren't baby boomers, but then what we're seeing is that as the waves and waves of new acculturation, as the kids come online, and as the young adults come online, they have a different view of the world, just as you're suggesting. And so we're using older terms, and so we need to think about that very carefully. Secondly, the concept of civic engagement to 20-year-olds is very different. So when we do psychological profiles of 20-year-olds at the university or 18-year-olds incoming as freshmen, they have the highest desire to be of value to the community and of service to the community of any group ever recorded. For the last 70 years, these surveys have been being done. But they don't call it civic engagement. They have a different name for it. They want to be of service, but it's not civic engagement in the way that we're using the term. And then the third issue here relative to civic engagement is that there is so much negative energy coming from some of our civic leaders. The nature of the discourse, the nature of the argument, the way that they're referring to each other, the way that they argue with each other, the way they line up, that there's a rejection of that arena, and then they're looking for other arenas to become engaged or other ways to become engaged. So you're aware of this from the Lodestar Center. There's no shortage of new social enterprises being organized. Arizona's seen thousands of ideas floated and hundreds of new organizations started that are focused on social issues and are social enterprises. None of those organizations by the younger kids would be viewed as civic engagement. They wouldn't see it that way. So one of the things that we have to do is be flexible even relative to our concepts and our terms to make sure that we can engage all elements of the community. And so you brought up a very good point, which is that we're not quite there yet.
Thank you. Good morning. My name's Sandy Benson, and I'm with Washington Elementary School District. And my question has absolutely nothing to do with education. My question is, when you have conversations with corporate heads, and we all hear, you talked about the profitability or productivity this past year of companies. We all hear they're hoarding cash and not hiring people. What are your conversations with them like? What are they spending more money or allocating more of that, whatever they're hoarding, towards innovation and R&D? What are their plans for whatever their productivity savings that they have? I mean, I understand you're not familiar with all the financial statements and strategies of every company, but with the ones that you do have conversations with.
Well, what's interesting, so I'm a member of the National Council on Competitiveness, which is a group of CEOs of Fortune 500 corporations and major universities, and I'm also part of the National Advisory Council for Innovation, which was organized by the administration for, it's not partisan, for university leaders and industry leaders to come together and talk about exactly these things. And so I'm a part of both of those groups. And what's interesting in those groups when we're talking is that we're experiencing, this is why I brought up the point about this fixation on the government in Washington. Everybody's got their eyes focused on that. And there's uncertainty as a function of how they're debating and discussing things. So most of the industry guys they're just basically hedging their bets. They're just holding in, they don't know what to do. They don't know the model that they're going to be operating under. They don't know the rules or the parameters. They're able to very carefully advance their economic objectives by buying this company or hiring some high-end people relative to this, or advancing a new technology in a certain kind of limited kind of way. And for whatever reason, and I don't know how many business or corporate leaders are here, but they generally are disassociated from thinking about the success of the community as their objective. So this notion of making the economic competitiveness of the United States as the single objective for everyone, business leaders, community leaders, school leaders, university leaders, civic engagement leaders, social enterprise leaders, religious leaders, everyone. How do we make the country more economically competitive? We haven't gotten there yet because that's not how they think. Now, I will also say that the world is very complex. I was in Vietnam not too long ago on behalf of ASU because the Intel Corporation, which is in Chandler, is the maker of the most advanced microchips on the planet. There's several fabrication facilities in Chandler where the average wage in those fabrication facilities is $110,000 a year. Those are basically factories. They take those advanced microchips, they put them onto these racks, they put them on planes, and they fly them to Vietnam. Now, why do they do that? Because the labor is cheaper there and the workforce is developed there, and they can do the next step, which is to test those chips and to prepare those chips for installation into devices. So the chips are then installed into devices in Malaysia and China and Singapore and other places, but the facility over there is such that they're not getting the labor that they want. So they actually are asking us to help them solve their education problem in Vietnam. Now, what does that all mean? Intel, as a corporation, with massive investments in Arizona, is a global corporation. How can Arizona do everything that we can do to help Intel to be successful at every possible level? It's really complicated, and what it means is creating an environment where these institutions have the capacity to be successful in all that they do. And so when we talk with the Intel leaders, what they say is, well, we can't do that in the United States, when in fact they could if we could move faster. They could if we could produce from our community colleges and universities working together, not just, a world-class research engineer, but the finest technicians that the world has ever seen. And we've sort of given up on that. And so the notion is, how can we be this comprehensive, engaging community to work with a company like Intel to help them to be able to do more and more of their things here? We just haven't sat down to do that. I know that's sort of a convoluted answer, but it's a problem. And you got to be aware that it's more complex. You have to be able to beat the economic advantage of the facility in Vietnam, or we have to become the place that's supporting those facilities in Vietnam by offering other things like educational assets.
Dr. Crow, thank you very much for your presentation today. My name is Ruben Gonzalez. I'm an 18-year small business owner. 2 points. One, we as a community as well as a nation have impacted our economic competitiveness through our greed. And I would like to understand, when you have your conversations with other leaders, how that comes into play. And then also, secondly, with the debt that we've acquired as a nation, what are we going to be doing in terms of managing that as we continue to try and strive towards economic competitiveness?
So let me take the debt issue first. There's only one way out of the debt crisis. There's only one way. And the discussions are not focused on that. The only way out is economic growth. There is no other way. The money's already been spent. It has to be paid back. We can't get into a situation like Greece or Italy or Spain or Portugal or Ireland, where we are unable. I mean, the calamitous outcome of the United States reaching a point where it defaults on its debt is beyond belief. Yet, how much of the discussion is focused on economic growth? How many of the decisions being made are focused on that? Not enough. How much of the energy is focused on taking every tool we have and every asset that we have and everything that we can do to grow our way to success? It's the only way that the debt can be addressed. Now, obviously, we have to stop those spending behaviors also. And we have to take the money that we are willing to invest and invest it in our economic success. Those are the things that we've got to do. Those are not necessarily the things that we are doing. To your first question related to greed, you know, we're set up on an economic system where we permit winner-take-all outcomes. And that's not necessarily bad by itself. It's bad when everybody doesn't have a chance to be a winner. See what I'm saying? And so we have to create a situation where everyone has a chance to advance. Everyone has a chance to be a winner. We're not there yet. You know, greed is an act of selfishness, but there's elements of, it's a complex term, but what we really have to do is create an opportunity for everybody to be a winner. I'm getting signal to leave here, so. All right, thank you, everybody.